Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and Plunderstorm is back for the patch 11.0.7 until roughly the release of the patch 11.1. But the event is back like before for a limited time, which means that you should start playing and massing up as much plunder right now in order to unlock all of its limited time rewards, from brand new transmogs, mounts, pets, other cosmetic and collectible options. There's so many different things for you to collect this time around, where players get to collect new rewards, but also if you didn't play the original Plunderstorm, you can also collect a bunch of the old rewards as well to make sure that you don't miss out on any of them whatsoever. And for those of you that are jumping into it for the first time, there's way too many things for you to collect all at once. But if you're trying to farm out these things as quickly as possible, then this video will go over all of the tips and tricks as to how you can get the most amount of plunder from Plunderstorm matches. Specifically, we're going to cover whether you should play duos, solos, what abilities you should look out for, and what content should you focus on to get you the most amount of plunder. Even if you're not someone who likes WoW PvP and don't really want to fight other players in Plunderstorm, this guide will also go over all of the ways that you can farm plunder without necessarily having to engage with other players either. As always though, if you guys want to see more guides for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So I recently ended up finishing up my entire catalog of all the things that can buy you through Plunderstorm, and it's such a fun event. I'm definitely going to keep playing even after this, but yeah, farming the actual Plunderstorm, it looks like, is a little bit easier than it was during the initial launch. Now, first of all, how do you even get plunder in Plunderstorm? Plunder as a currency is awarded from just about everything you do within Plunderstorm. Plunder as a currency is scattered all over the map. Just in random locations, you'll find piles of treasures, and picking it up adds you additional plunder. Plunder can also drop from most enemies, especially from rare enemies, so when you see star icons on your map, those are the enemies you want to watch out for. Slaying other players is also another fantastic way to get more plunder in Plunderstorm. As players collect abilities and plunder, when you slay them, all of their abilities and all plunder they're carrying can all be looted by you after you slay them, so you are very much encouraged for some PvP combat. You can also find plunder in chests. There's a variety of different chests. Some of these chests are going to have an outline. Most of the supply chests will just give you items for you to use. Magic chests like this are going to be in different rarities: purple, blue, and green. Those come with also a variety of different abilities. The golden chests will look kind of like this. They'll have an obvious golden outline, and they'll have sometimes like a draconic face or like scales on them. They'll look kind of draconic in nature, but those are the chests that award you the most amount of plunder. Some are going to be small chests that take a second to drop, as well as not giving nearly as much plunder, but the big ones do take you a little bit of time to open, but they give you far more plunder. Also, you get quite a bit of plunder from daily rewards, like daily quests, but also match rewards with match quests. Like every time you queue for a match, you'll get a different quest at the start of a match, and by completing, you get quite a bit of plunder. You get 800 for a daily quest, but also you get 250 for a match reward. So just by playing Plunderstorm, from all the different activities, slaying players, slaying enemies, rares, farming treasures, all of those things award you quite a bit of plunder. You will just get the currency just by playing the game. However, we can optimize this in order to be as efficient as we can to get the most amount of plunder for the least amount of time spent. Now, the first thing you should go into when it comes to farming Plunderstorm, which mode is the most efficient between solos or duos? I personally think, and it really just depends on your situation, but if you got duos with a friend that's reliably and that you could trust in farming Plunderstorm, I think duos can be quite fun. But duos is where a lot of players play to get super aggressive, because when two players jump another two-player group, they're more than likely to fight those players because two players are a lot more powerful than a single one. So I notice players are a lot more aggressive in duos. In solos, however, I notice players are a little bit more passive, or at least a little bit more avert to being hostile immediately. This isn't always the case. I have been soloed down by players immediately that play super aggressively before, but in most cases when I land in a place and there's another player, we usually tend to avoid fighting each other immediately, instead choosing to farm up and get abilities, and then maybe later down the line one of us will engage in hostile activities. So I'd say solos for me have been better when it comes to farming raw amount of plunder, but your experience may vary depending on whether you're looking for PvP activities or if you're just trying to farm solo without any players disturbing your time. Another thing you'll need to pay attention to is choosing the right spot to land in when you first start a Plunderstorm match. Blizzard, since the last Plunderstorm, learned a couple of lessons and heard a lot of community feedback. And now you don't just get randomized spawns where you drop in for Plunderstorm, you now get to choose a couple of different places that you can start in usually located near some of the more populated enemy dense areas. And they even added map markers based on players and what they got to experience within the last Plunderstorm, and were able to allocate areas as a green circle, yellow, and red, with green highlighting spaces generally is low risk when it comes to PvP for players looking to usually avoid players, though these areas are usually not as high in rewards as some of the more competitive areas. Yellow is kind of moderate risk, where sometimes you may encounter occasional skirmishes, but generally you'll see more rares and more rewards. And red are high density areas where there's a lot of rares and chests for you to loot, but also those are the places where most players are going to want to jump into for PvP specifically. However, just from playing today earlier, I did notice the green can be a bit of a bait, as sometimes you drop in on a green spot, but it looks like every other player that's looking to avoid PvP tries to drop in on green, and then players that are more experienced, that have more time spent in Plunderstorm than newer players, also start to drop in on green for easy farming. So green doesn't necessarily mean it is a safe spot, it just means potentially, possibly a safe spot, but sometimes it can be just as much of a trap as anything. Instead, you should focus on certain spots where players are less likely to go to in general, and from my time spent, there's a couple of good spots. Like the middle part where between Hammerfall and Witherbark Village there's an undead spawn area. I don't really see a lot of players go there, but there's also a lot of enemies for you to slay early on for some easy plunder. Also, location east of the Kobold Mines near Argorok, we have this spot right here, which is kind of like this orcish battlefield area. There's also a lot of enemies and a couple of rares, and usually not a lot of players go here. Usually the mines as well as Argorok are pretty populated, but the spot between that and the farmstead is generally not as populated. You can even go down here with the Alliance flight path area would normally be in Arathi Highlands. That's also another spot where I don't see nearly as many players go to on average. Now, another spot that's also really good is actually south of Stormguard. You'll have to choose to spawn at Stormguard Keep, but you'll actually go to this cove behind Stormguard. I've seen only a handful of players go here so far. Sometimes you'll see a single team and a duo go here, but this is usually a really chill farming spot. There's just a bunch of pirates, a couple of rares, bunch of treasures, and generally it's a very, very good spot, though it's one that normally, at least as of this video, not a lot of people go to, but there's a good chance once news spreads, when players are trying to figure out more favorable spots to go in to farm all of these events, more players are going to discover that the Cove is a best in slot spot, and likely more players are going to start going there. So if that one starts to get populated, then the other ones are also decent options, especially if you're looking to avoid PvP entirely. Now, the first thing you should do once you drop in the map is complete your daily quest for easy plunder. Like I mentioned, it's like 800 free plunder for the daily quest, but also 250 per match quest. So focusing on completing that as soon as possible awards you a ton of plunder for very little effort. Now, once you do get in the game of Plunderstorm and you are in a decent spot to farm, prioritize PvE content over PvP at the very beginning. In fact, especially if you're someone who doesn't really want to PvP against other players, you should prioritize on all PvE content in particular. Start focusing on rares, enemies, treasures, pick up a bunch of abilities, and just try to focus on leveling up as quickly as possible. Because when you farm, you get experience, and when you get experience, your health pool grows larger, you do additional damage, and when players see another player that is higher level than they are a lot less likely to engage and fight when they are at a level disadvantage. So in most cases, just by farming and leveling up, it will deter other players from wanting to fight you in the first place. Maybe you're looking for a fight, and then having a higher level over them is going to give you an advantage. But if you're not looking for a fight, having a higher level may be just enough for players to completely avoid you and run in the opposite direction, leaving you to farm to your heart's content, collecting additional experience, and then completely snowballing against all other players. Now, when you're just trying to farm as much plunder as possible, certain abilities are going to be much better. Like if you're focusing on non-PvP against other players, or just trying to be as efficient as possible, certain spells and skills are going to be much better at you being able to clear out enemies very quickly. Firewall is a fantastic ability, can be good against other players, but it's so good at AoEing enemies down, and it just allows you to clear out trash bags and rares incredibly quickly. Another ability that's really good is Holy Shield for its AoE clear, and even something like Searing Axe is really good if you like to get up close and personal. Another ability that's insanely good is Celestial Barrage. This is like a ranged snipe ability, but the amount of damage it can do and the distance it can travel is massive, and that can be super helpful when you're just trying to clear out enemies really quickly. It's super effective against players, but it's also super effective against rares as well. As for your utilitarian abilities, you got a couple of good options. Faeform is a fantastic escape tool, but also just great mobility tool that allows you to travel from pack to pack, from objective to objective, from rare to rare very, very quickly. It can be used to avoid other players, but also to just go and get yourself as much distance as possible. Quaking Leap is also another great mobility, but can also be used offensively as well. It deals a solid bit of damage to foes, but can also be used just to move around as well. Also, Fade to Shadows, great mobility skill, also a great escape tool if you want to avoid other players. It helps you vanish, teleport forward a short distance, and allows you to stay stealth for a little bit. So if you use those abilities pretty aggressively, you can really get around the open field of Arathi Basin fast. If you are looking to potentially avoid other players and you think you're going to be encountering an area with high density of players and you need additional escape tools, Steel Trap is a great option. You drop a bunch of traps all around the player, enemies can get caught, especially if they use movement abilities. That can be incredibly helpful. So drop a couple of steel traps, use mobility skills to escape, and just try to get out of there as quickly as possible. Out of all the new skills, however, Void Terror is interesting. It's really great as an escape tool to retreat, but this is more for players that are looking to engage. I wouldn't really use this nearly as much. Gale Feather could also be really good just to push enemies away, but the longer cooldown at the very start does make it not as good, so I'd focus on some of the more classic Plunderstorm abilities to start with. Now, outside of farming rares and treasures, should you focus on fighting players at all? If you're someone who's very averse to PvP, as some players are, because you really want to get all the rewards from Plunderstorm, but you may not necessarily wish to engage in PvP combat specifically, if you're just really absolutely not interested whatsoever in PvP combat to begin with at all, technically, after farming all the mobs, you could just run into the storm and then get yourself slain. That is an optional objective. A lot of players have done this way back in the day. Just drop in an area, farm as much as they can, run into the storm, avoid all players completely. However, I actually think the more efficient method, if you're just trying to get the most amount of plunder, once you get level 5, is to actually go and slay other players. Even if you're not a big fan of it, mostly because it is more efficient when it comes to farming plunder on a character. Because you'll either come into two outcomes. Either you will slay them, collecting their plunder, getting even more plunder for the match, or you get slain, which is perfectly fine because it shoots you out back to the lobby and you queue for another match to farm even more plunder. Essentially, this allows you to either collect the most amount of plunder very, very quickly, or you get thrown in the next match, allowing you to get more matches to collect even more plunder. It's a win-win situation, even if you're not amazing at Plunderstorm combat. And it's actually one of the fastest ways of going about it. Technically, you could just stick out through the rest of the match and try to slay as many players towards the tail end, because you will earn additional plunder if you play throughout the entire match and try to be the last one standing. If you do end up choosing that strategy, however, I would focus on leveling as much as possible the entire time. Don't ever stop gaining XP throughout a match. Also, once the storm starts to close in, try to stay towards the edges of the storm. This way no one can sneak up behind you, and this can allow you to at least make sure you're not surprised by PvP combat, but rather you can expect it and see it in front of you and at least be prepared for it a little bit better. Also, if you're playing solo in particular, you don't have to fight every single enemy you encounter in Plunderstorm. Some players may see you, but they may not want to fight you either, so it may be a good idea to pick your fights carefully. If you see two players fighting each other, both of them are low, that's a great time to swoop in and try to see if you can land a kill, maybe even two, and collect even more plunder. But the worst that can happen is maybe you run in, maybe you die, but you just get kicked out to the start of a queue to queue for another match and collect even more plunder through farming, through the daily quest. Because if you're specifically focused on winning matches, you still can earn a lot of plunder just by playing the game. And by having quick, fast-paced matches, whether you win some, lose some, you can still earn a lot of plunder just by playing as many games as possible. But as always though, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching and hope you guys did enjoy this Plunderstorm update. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, hang this video a like. I would very, very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community for any future World of Warcraft updates regarding War Within, Plunderstorm, or the patch 11.1 over on the PTR. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.